It was a stormy night, the kind that makes the walls tremble and the lights flicker. I live alone, miles from the nearest town, so when someone knocked on my door after midnight, I thought I was hearing things. But when I opened it, a man was standing there. Or at least, something that looked like a man. His eyes were silver. His skin faintly glowed. And when he finally spoke, he said, "I'm lost. But before I return home, you must hear what I came to tell you about Jesus." Before I tell you what he revealed that night, hit that subscribe button. Because once you hear what this being said, you'll never see faith, God, or the universe the same way again. I'd lived in that cabin for 8 years. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom, a wood stove, and a front porch that leaned slightly to the left. After my divorce, I'd wanted distance from everything. People, noise, expectations. Out there, the only sounds were wind, rain, and the occasional coyote. That night, a storm was rolling in from the hills. The sky was black, no moon, no stars. Just thunder crawling across the distance like the growl of something ancient. I was reading, half asleep, when the knock came. 3 sharp raps, evenly spaced. At first, I thought it was the wind. But then came another, softer, deliberate. I froze. Nobody ever came out here. The road was gravel and washed out most of the year. My nearest neighbor lived 2 miles away. I grabbed a flashlight, crossed the creaking floor, and called out, "Who's there?" A voice answered, male, calm. "Please, I need help." Something about it didn't sound right. The tone was perfect, too perfect, like someone who'd learned English by studying recordings. I hesitated, then unlatched the door and pulled it open. He was standing in the rain, drenched but oddly composed. Tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with a face that was human but not quite. His skin had a faint bluish glow beneath the surface, like moonlight trapped under glass. His eyes were silver gray, reflecting my porch light like mirrors. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice quiet. "I didn't mean to frighten you." "Where the hell did you come from?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly, as if confused by the question. "Far away. I was separated from my vessel during transit." "Transit? You mean—" "Not your concern," he interrupted gently. "What matters is that I am lost. And before I am found, I must deliver a message. One that was meant for your kind 2,000 years ago." I laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. "You're out of your mind. Or high. Or both." He didn't move. Rain poured down his face, but his expression didn't change. "You believe in God," he said. "You pray before bed. You still keep a Bible on your shelf, though you haven't opened it in years." That stopped me cold. "How the hell do you know that?" "I was there," he said simply. "Where? When he came." My breath caught. "When who came?" He stepped forward into the light. His eyes seemed to shimmer with something vast, not menace but sorrow. "When the one you call Jesus walked this earth." I stared at him, thunder shaking the windows. My mind refused to process the words. "You're saying you knew him?" He nodded once. "I did more than know him. I served him. I was sent with him. And I failed him." Lightning flashed behind him, illuminating the forest for a split second. In that flash, I saw that the rain didn't touch him. It fell around him, sliding off an invisible field. I have wandered ever since, he said softly, until tonight. When I found you, I swallowed hard. Why me? Because you still listen, he said, and because the truth must be told again, before it's forgotten forever. A gust of wind blew the door wide open, scattering papers across the floor. The fire hissed, and through the storm, his voice came again, calm, certain, and unearthly. He didn't come here to die for your sins, he said. He came to show you how to survive what's coming. For a long time, neither of us said anything. The storm hammered the roof, and the only sound inside was the crackle of the fire. The stranger, or whatever he was, stood near the doorway, water dripping from his clothes onto the wooden floor. I wanted to believe he was just some lost hiker with a strange story, but something deep in me knew better. Sit down, I said finally. You look like you're about to collapse. He obeyed, slowly, gracefully, like someone not used to gravity. I tossed him a towel from the back of a chair. He held it awkwardly, examining the fabric between his fingers as if he'd never touched anything like it before. You said you were with Jesus, I said carefully. That's a big claim. It's not a claim, he replied, looking up. It's memory. His eyes shimmered faintly, silver light pulsing in their depths. Where I come from, we do not forget. Time folds for us. Everything we have seen remains vivid. I remember him as clearly as I see you now. I pulled a chair closer, unsure why I wasn't running. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something deeper, something that made me want to believe him, despite every sane thought screaming otherwise. What are you? I asked. He smiled faintly. We called ourselves Watchers. Your scriptures mention us, though the words have been twisted over time. We were sent to observe, to guide quietly, to protect where we could, and Jesus. He was one of us, the being said, but he was the only one who chose to become human, fully, painfully human. He took on your form not out of punishment, but out of love. He wanted to show your kind how to become what we are. I felt my chest tighten. You're saying Jesus was an alien? He tilted his head, amused. That word is small for what he was. We are not from your world, yes, but he was more than that. He was consciousness given form, light condensed into flesh. He came to awaken what already exists inside all of you, inside us. He leaned forward. The same light. The same spark. You are not children of dust, as you've been told. You are fragments of what he was. Lost, sleeping fragments of a greater whole. The fire hissed as rain leaked through the chimney. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Why tell me this now? I whispered. He looked into the flames. Because your world is on the edge. The teachings he left, love, forgiveness, compassion, were not moral lessons. They were survival codes. You were meant to practice them until they became your nature, until your consciousness rose above destruction. But you forgot. You turned his message into religion. And religion cannot save you. What are we supposed to be saved from? He turned back to me, and the firelight caught the angles of his face. From yourselves, he said. From the darkness that feeds on fear. It's not an army or a creature. It's the hunger that grows wherever love dies. He came to teach you how to rise beyond it, to remember what you truly are before it consumes you. I swallowed hard. And you? What happened to you? He looked down at his hands. When he died, I couldn't bear it. We weren't meant to feel grief, but I did. And in that grief I fell. I've wandered ever since, searching for redemption. Thunder rumbled again. The lights flickered. "Why me?" I asked. "I'm nobody." He smiled sadly. "That's why. Truth hides best in ordinary hearts. He chose fishermen, not kings. I choose you for the same reason I stared at him, my pulse thundering with the storm." He leaned closer, voice barely a whisper. "Will you listen long enough to remember what your soul already knows?" After a few minutes of silence, he reached into the pocket of his soaked jacket and pulled out something small, a smooth black stone, no larger than a coin, faintly glowing from within. "What is that?" I asked. He turned it over in his palm, the light shifting like liquid. "A fragment of memory," he said. "It holds what your kind would call proof." "Proof of what?" He looked up at me. "Of him." I wanted to laugh. Proof of Jesus from a stranger in the middle of a thunderstorm? But something about his eyes, calm, ancient, sorrowful, froze the words in my throat. "Show me," I said quietly. He nodded and placed the stone on the wooden table between us. The glow intensified, casting pale silver light across the walls. Then the room changed. The sound of the rain vanished. The fire froze in mid-flicker. The air thickened, humming with vibration. And suddenly, I wasn't in my cabin anymore. I was standing in a desert. Warm wind on my face. Sand stretching to the horizon beneath a sky filled with stars brighter than I'd ever seen. He was there too, the stranger, but younger somehow. His clothes were different, simple, flowing, and not far from us stood a man. He wasn't tall or glowing. He wasn't surrounded by light or wings or any of the things I'd been taught to associate with holiness. He looked utterly human. Dark hair, dark eyes, sun-browned skin. But there was something about the way he moved, the way the air seemed to shift around him. I knew instantly who he was. Jesus. He was speaking to a small group gathered around a fire, men, women, children. His voice carried easily in the night. "Love your enemies," he said, "because when you hate, you feed the darkness that seeks to devour you. And that darkness lives not outside you, but within. Every act of forgiveness weakens it. Every act of love destroys it." The crowd listened, enraptured. Some nodded, some wept. And behind him, faintly visible, like shapes made of light, stood others. Beings, dozens of them. Watchers. They were watching Jesus as though protecting him, but also learning from him. The man beside me, the stranger, pointed toward them. "My kind," he said softly, "we came to teach, but he came to change." Even us, the scene shifted again. Jesus walking alone in a garden, kneeling, whispering words of prayer. The watchers stood at a distance. The stranger approached him. "Ariel," Jesus said quietly, "you must not interfere." Ariel. The name echoed in my head. "I cannot bear to watch you suffer," the younger Ariel said. "You must," Jesus replied gently, "because what happens next will teach the universe what love truly means." He looked up then, and for one impossible second, his gaze met mine, directly, as if he could see me, across 2,000 years and one human life. "Remember this," he said. "They will forget what I was. But if even one remembers what I taught, the light will survive. Then everything went white. The desert, the fire, the stars, gone. I was back in my cabin, the rain pounding against the roof again. The fire hissed back to life. The stone on the table dimmed to black. I stared at it, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Ariel watched me quietly. "Now you know," he said. He was not worshiping himself. He was teaching survival through love. I sat back, shaking. That was real. He nodded once. Memory doesn't lie. For a long time I couldn't move. My hands were still trembling from what I'd seen, or dreamed, or whatever it was. The cabin smelled of smoke and wet wood, but the air itself felt different now. He sat across from me, silent, patient, as if waiting for the storm inside me to quiet. Finally, I whispered, "That was 2,000 years ago." "Yes," Ariel said, "for you." He spoke with that same calm certainty, but I could hear a trace of something else now. Weariness. For us, time is a thread we can walk along. We do not live moments in sequence. We exist within all of them at once. So when you said you remembered, I murmured, you meant it literally. He inclined his head. I remember watching him rise. I remember his final breath. I remember the sky trembling when his body died, and the silence that followed when his consciousness moved beyond matter. That silence still echoes. I rubbed my forehead, trying to make sense of it all. If you can walk through time, why not go back? Warn people earlier? Stop what's coming. Because interference destroys choice, Ariel said softly, and choice is sacred. Even for you. Choice to do what? To love. Or not. His words were simple, but they landed with the weight of galaxies. I looked at the black stone still resting on the table. If what you showed me is true, why hasn't humanity seen you before? Why wait until now? He folded his hands together, and the light in his eyes dimmed slightly. Because you stopped looking. You built walls between the sacred and the ordinary. You created religion instead of relationship. You pray to icons instead of listening for the whisper within your own heart. And yet, in the quietest places, people like you still hear. That is why I found you. I let out a shaky laugh. So I'm supposed to do what? Tell the world an alien showed me a hologram of Jesus in my living room? If you call it that, he said, no one will believe you. But if you speak the truth of it, the essence, not the spectacle, some will listen. They will feel what you felt tonight. That is enough, and what exactly is the essence? That love is not emotion, Ariel said. It is evolution. Every act of compassion changes the geometry of consciousness. Every moment of forgiveness increases the light your kind carries. You were meant to keep raising that light, generation by generation, until the darkness could no longer feed on you. But the light dimmed, and now it is almost gone. He paused, staring into the fire. Jesus came to ignite that light again. But after he left, others buried it beneath ritual, doctrine, and fear. They built temples around a flame they no longer understood. Are you saying he failed? Ariel looked up sharply. No, he succeeded perfectly. You failed to remember I felt those words like a blade and a balm all at once. What happens, I asked quietly, if we never remember? He studied me for a long moment. then the dark will feed again. It doesn't come with armies or fire. It comes through despair, division, cruelty, and indifference. When enough of it gathers, your world will collapse from within. Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains. And that's what's coming? He nodded. It has already begun. Lightning lit his face for an instant, and I saw it clearly. The sadness of someone who had watched countless civilizations forget what they were meant to become. I whispered, "Can we still change it?" He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw hope flicker there. "Yes," he said, "but only if you remember faster than you forget." The storm had eased by morning, but my mind hadn't. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, not the painted version from church, but the one I'd seen in that desert vision. Human, tired, infinite. Ariel hadn't moved all night. He sat by the window, still as stone, watching the gray dawn filter through the fog. "You don't sleep?" I asked. "Not the way you do," he replied. "When I close my eyes, I walk the threads of time. I see possibilities, some fading, some still alive. What do you see for us?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he touched the fogged glass with a fingertip, tracing small, glowing lines that pulsed faintly before vanishing. "I see two paths. One of remembrance, one of ruin." I sat at the table, my coffee untouched. "You keep talking about remembering. What exactly have we forgotten?" "Everything that matters," he said softly. "You were made from light, but you learned to worship shadows. You turned love into transaction, truth into weapon, God into a mirror for your own fears." That was never his way. The words hit hard because they were true. I'd seen enough cruelty in the world, in people, in myself, to know how easily we traded kindness for comfort. "What happens if we can't change?" I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something close to fear. "Then your world ends not in fire, but in silence. Consciousness withers. The light collapses inward, and the ones who feed on it return." "The ones who feed on it," I repeated slowly. "You mean there's something that consumes consciousness?" He nodded once. "They have no name in your language. In ours we call them the empty. They are ancient as creation, remnants of worlds that forgot love. When a species turns inward, when fear becomes its heartbeat, the empty come. They consume what remains of the soul's light and move on. You would call it extinction. We call it harvest." I felt cold all over. "You're saying that's what happened on other worlds?" He met my gaze, unblinking. "It happens everywhere light forgets itself. But it can be stopped. It always could. How? The same way he taught. By transforming consciousness through love. Forgiveness isn't a moral rule, it's physics. Love raises vibration. Hate lowers it. When enough of your kind live as he lived, the empty cannot touch you. You rise beyond their reach." I rubbed my face, trying to take it all in. "You're telling me love is a kind of shield?" "More than that," he said. "It's the only real evolution. Technology won't save you. Belief won't save you. Only becoming what he was will." I stood, pacing the cabin. "And what if people don't believe me? You think the world's going to listen to some guy in the woods who says an alien told him Jesus was an interdimensional teacher of light. Ariel smiled faintly. They won't listen to your words. They'll listen to your change. Truth is not taught. It is transmitted. When one remembers, others begin to. His voice softened. That's why he needed witnesses. Not followers, not preachers, witnesses. Those who had seen love made flesh and could embody it again. Why me? I asked. Because you've lost enough to understand what love costs, he said quietly. You've known pain, yet you haven't closed your heart. That makes you rare. I turned away, my throat tightening. So what happens now? He rose slowly, his tall form nearly brushing the ceiling. Now, you decide if you'll carry what you've seen. The next part of your life depends on it. Will I see you again? He looked toward the fading clouds. When you're ready to believe, you already do. And then he was gone. Just gone. The air shimmered for a second where he'd stood, and then it was just me, alone, with a cooling cup of coffee and a black stone still pulsing faintly on my table. For 3 days, I didn't leave the cabin. I barely ate. Every sound, the wind through the pines, the crack of the wood stove, felt sharper, like the world itself was holding its breath. I kept staring at the black stone on the table, half expecting it to light up again. It didn't. I began to question everything. Maybe I'd dreamed it. Maybe I'd fallen asleep reading the Bible, and my mind stitched the storm into a hallucination. But every time I tried to believe that, I'd catch a faint silver shimmer on the edge of my vision, like the afterimage of lightning that refused to fade. On the 4th morning, I went outside. The storm had cleared, leaving the world washed and silent. Steam rose from the wet earth. I looked up at the sky, bright and impossibly blue, and said out loud, "If you're still out there, I need to know this wasn't just in my head." No answer. No sign. Just wind. That silence hit harder than thunder. I went back inside and opened my Bible for the first time in years. The pages felt fragile, like old skin. I turned to the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 12. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. For the first time, the words didn't sound like metaphor. They sounded literal. That's when I made my decision. I was going to tell someone. I drove into town that afternoon. It felt strange being around people again. Ordinary faces. Ordinary lives. Everyone scrolling through phones, rushing somewhere, oblivious to the idea that the universe might be watching them. I went straight to the only person I trusted, Reverend Carter. He'd been my pastor before I left the city. A good man, open-minded, or so I thought. He was surprised to see me. "Well, I'll be. You look like you've seen a ghost." I sat in his office, hands shaking. "Something happened," I said. "Something I can't explain." And I told him everything. He listened at first, politely, patiently, then started frowning. When I got to the part about Ariel and the vision of Jesus, his patience cracked. "You've been under stress," he said carefully. "Isolation does strange things to a man. Maybe this was your mind's way of—" "I wasn't hallucinating," I snapped. "I saw him. I heard him. I felt it." He sighed, leaning back. "You've always had faith, son. Maybe too much of it. You're trying to make sense of a world that doesn't. I stood up, anger rising. You preach every Sunday that Jesus will return, and now you're calling me crazy for saying I met someone who knew him. He hesitated, then said quietly, "Faith doesn't mean believing every voice that claims to speak for God. Sometimes the devil dresses like an angel of light that cut deeper than I expected." I left without another word. Outside, the evening sun was sinking behind the steeple. I could still hear his voice echoing. Sometimes the devil dresses like an angel of light. But what I'd seen, what I'd felt, wasn't darkness. It was something deeper, clearer, like light remembering itself. That night, back at the cabin, I sat in the dark and whispered into the silence, "I'm not crazy." The black stone on the table flickered once, just once, like a heartbeat, and I knew he was still listening. The next morning, the black stone was still glowing faintly, like an ember refusing to die. I held it in my palm and felt its warmth spread up my arm into my chest. It was as if the stone itself was breathing. I realized something then. Ariel wasn't coming back to tell me what to do. The decision was mine now. Either keep the experience locked inside like a secret I was too afraid to share, or risk being called insane and tell the truth anyway. I spent the day making notes at my kitchen table. Everything he'd said, every detail of the vision, every word Jesus had spoken on that hillside. My handwriting shook as I filled page after page. It felt less like writing and more like remembering a dream before it faded. By evening, I knew what I had to do. I drove into town again, this time to the library. They had free internet and a small media room no one used. My hands trembled as I set up an old camcorder from the community bulletin board. I sat down in front of the lens and pressed record. "My name is Daniel Reeves," I said. My voice sounded rough, but steady. "I'm not a priest. I'm not a prophet. I'm just a man who lives in the woods. And I need to tell you what happened to me last week." I told it all. The knock on the door, Ariel, the vision, the truth about what Jesus had really come to teach. I didn't try to make it sound scientific or mystical. I just described what I'd seen and felt. The camera's red light blinked quietly, as if taking my confession. When I was done, I uploaded the video to a new channel I named The Lost Knock. I didn't add music or effects, just my words, my face, my eyes. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining strangers laughing at me in the comments, calling me a fraud, a lunatic. But by morning, the video had been shared 1,000 times. By afternoon, 10,000. By the third day, 100,000 views. The comments surprised me. Yes, there were skeptics, trolls, insults, but mixed among them were messages like, "This explains things I've felt for years but couldn't name." I had a dream about a glowing man telling me the same words. I don't know why, but listening to this makes me want to forgive someone I've hated for a long time. Something was happening, something beyond me. I started getting emails from people who wanted to talk, to pray, to meet. Not church groups, not religious fanatics, ordinary people. Truck drivers, nurses, students, single parents, people who'd been quietly carrying a hunger for something real. I didn't tell them they had to believe me. I told them what Ariel told me. Don't believe. Practice. Start forgiving. Start loving. Start changing the geometry of your consciousness. Somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized the truth Ariel had left me with. I wasn't supposed to prove anything. I wasn't supposed to convince anyone. I was supposed to remember, and by remembering, help others remember too. That night, back at the cabin, I sat with the stone in my palm and whispered, "I'm trying." The glow brightened, pulsing once, then faded, and for the first time since he'd left, I didn't feel alone. The days that followed didn't feel real. What started as a strange confession in an empty library room had turned into something much bigger. The video kept spreading. A week later, it had passed 1 million views, then 5. News outlets began calling. Podcasters wanted interviews. I turned them down at first, but eventually agreed to one with a small, independent channel run by a quiet young man named Eli. He wasn't mocking or skeptical. He just asked me to tell the story again, in my own words. So I did. And somewhere during that interview, something changed. Eli's eyes welled up as I repeated Ariel's words. Love isn't emotion. It's evolution. When we finished recording, he whispered, "I don't know what that was, but I feel lighter." 2 days later, Eli posted the interview. It went viral again. But what followed wasn't ridicule. It was resonance. People started forming small groups, not churches, not cults, just circles of strangers who wanted to practice what they called the remembering. They met in parks, homes, coffee shops, even warehouses. No sermons, no rituals, just quiet hours of forgiveness exercises, shared meals, acts of kindness. And something in the air began to shift. A woman in Ohio wrote to me that her estranged daughter had shown up at her door after years of silence, saying she'd felt a pull to make things right. A man in Tokyo wrote that he'd been about to take his own life until he heard the line, "The darkness feeds wherever love dies." He said it stopped him. He wanted to live again. I didn't know what to make of it all. I wasn't leading anything. I didn't even want to. But the movement, if that's what it was, kept growing on its own. Then, one evening, the black stone began to glow again. I was sitting by the fire when it happened, the same way it had the first night. The air in the cabin grew thick, humming faintly, and before I could even stand, his voice filled the room. "Daniel." It wasn't outside me this time. It was through me, inside my chest, like another heartbeat. "Ariel?" I whispered. "I told you truth is transmitted, not taught," the voice said gently. "You are transmitting it now. The light is spreading faster than expected." My throat tightened. "You're saying it's working?" "Yes. Humanity remembers faster than I dared to hope. Many are awakening." I gripped the stone tightly. "Then why do I still feel so small? So unworthy?" "Because you still believe you are separate from the message," he said. "But you are not. You are part of it. You always were." The glow in the stone pulsed brighter, washing the cabin in white. "Ariel, am I ever going to see you again?" The voice softened, almost fond. "You already do. Every time someone forgives, every time someone chooses love over fear, you see me, because I am in part of what you call God. And so are you." Then the light dimmed. The cabin went silent again. I sat there for a long time, my hands trembling, the fire crackling quietly beside me. Outside, the night sky was clear for the first time in weeks. I could see stars scattered across the blackness, burning steady and bright. And for a fleeting second, I felt something. an invisible thread running between me and all of it. The sky, the stars, the strangers I'd never meet who were beginning to remember. The ripple had started, and there was no stopping it now. The ripple kept spreading. By spring, thousands of people were meeting in quiet circles all over the world. I would wake up to messages from places I'd never been. Brazil, Nigeria, Iceland, Mongolia. People telling me they were forgiving old grudges, reconciling with family, changing the way they treated strangers. I hadn't asked for followers, but I'd become a symbol. They called me the man from the cabin. Some even called me the witness. I hated that. I wasn't a prophet. I wasn't special. I was just a man who'd opened a door one rainy night. But with the attention came pressure. News anchors wanted debates. Skeptics accused me of running a scam. Conspiracy theorists said I was part of a government experiment. And the churches, oh, the churches, some embraced the message, but many condemned me outright. Heretic, blasphemer, false teacher. One evening, after another wave of angry emails, I sat on the porch and stared at the dark forest. The air was heavy with the smell of pine and wet earth. I felt like a man standing between two worlds, one still clinging to fear, the other trying to remember love. That's when the stone began to glow again. Not bright this time, just a soft pulse like a heartbeat. I picked it up, and before I could speak, I felt Ariel's presence. "You're wavering," he said, not accusing, just observing. "I'm tired," I admitted. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want a movement. I don't even know if I'm doing it right." "You're not supposed to know," he said gently. "You're supposed to live it." I clenched the stone harder. People are looking to me for answers I don't have. Some think you're an angel. Some think you're a demon. Some think I made you up. And I can't prove any of it. "That's the choice," he said. "Faith is not believing without evidence. Faith is living the evidence you've been given. You saw him. You felt the truth. That is your proof. Now embody it." His words sank into me like rain into dry soil. "I'm scared," I whispered. "You should be," Ariel said. "The path of love always costs something. Comfort, reputation, sometimes life itself. But it is the only path that leads beyond the darkness." I stared at the night sky. "I'm one man. What difference can I make?" Ariel's voice softened. "One man remembered once before, and the world has never been the same. You don't need to convince everyone. You need to live as if you already are what he showed you to be. That light calls to itself. It spreads. It multiplies. It awakens what has slept." The stone grew warmer in my hand until my palm tingled. "So what do I do now?" "Choose," Ariel said simply. "Keep living as before and let the memory fade. Or carry it into the world, even if it costs you everything." The glow dimmed, and his presence faded with it. I sat there for a long time, the forest quiet around me, the stone cooling in my hand. And for the first time since that night, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to choose. It's been 3 years since the night Ariel first knocked on my door. The world hasn't ended. The sky hasn't opened. No ships have descended from the clouds. But something quieter, deeper, has changed. People are softer, kinder, maybe. There's a gentleness in the way strangers look at one another now, as if they're all carrying some secret they can't quite explain. The circles still meet, but they've stopped calling themselves anything. No labels, no movements, just people remembering. As for me, I stayed in the cabin. I never went back to my old job. Never tried to explain it again on camera. I didn't need to. The truth didn't need me to defend it anymore. It was out there, alive, moving through people on its own. Sometimes I still take out the black stone. It no longer glows, but it hums faintly, like it's breathing. I keep it on my nightstand beside the small wooden cross my grandmother gave me when I was 10. 2 relics from 2 worlds, and somehow they don't feel separate anymore. Last winter, I had a dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream. I was standing in an endless white field. No horizon, no sky, just light. And out of that light, he came. Jesus, the way Ariel had shown him to me. Not the painted version from churches, but real, solid. His eyes holding galaxies and mercy at once. "You've done well," he said, smiling. "I haven't done anything," I replied. "People just found each other." He touched my shoulder. That was the point. You remembered. And in remembering, you helped others remember too. I wanted to ask him if the reapers were real, if the harvest was ever truly coming, if the whole thing had been a test or a metaphor. But before I could speak, he said, "Does it matter?" And somehow I knew it didn't. The light behind him grew brighter until I could barely see his face. "The kingdom of heaven isn't coming someday," he said. "It's already here." Every time love replaces fear, the kingdom expands. Every time one person forgives another, the harvest fails again. Then he looked at me, into me. "Tell them one last thing, Daniel. Tell them the truth they keep forgetting." "What truth?" I asked. "That I never left." The light consumed everything, and I woke up with tears streaming down my face. I haven't seen Ariel since, but sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees just right, I swear I can hear his voice in it. "You already see me." Maybe he was never just one being. Maybe he was something bigger, something woven into the structure of existence itself. Maybe that's what he meant when he said, "Love is evolution." I still don't pretend to understand it all. I don't think we're supposed to. But I know this. The night he knocked on my door, I thought I'd met an alien. What I actually met was a mirror, something that reflected back what I'd forgotten about myself, about all of us. That we are more than flesh and bone, more than fear and sin. We are fragments of the same consciousness trying to remember its source. And maybe that's the real reason he came here 2,000 years ago. Not to save us from punishment, but to remind us who we already were before the darkness convinced us to forget.